Is 9 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Angie Andreessen. I'm the business analyst here at DLI. I know I've interacted with most of you. We are going to be focusing on eForm users in this campus answer hour today. So just a few reminders for logistics. I'll be recording this meeting so that we can put a copy up on the DLI website after. Additionally, I did go ahead and just mute everybody upon entry, just to minimize background noise. And so the easiest way for us to kind of keep track of questions is to use the chat. So if you have questions or you want to see something specific, please just feel free to use the chat and we will answer your questions. So jumping right into the content, as I said the last time we had one of these answer hours, this one is structured a little bit differently than our usual answer hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all just a really quick release update of what impacted the eForm trading partners in our last Thursday night release. I'm going to run through some of the frequently asked questions, and then after that, I'll open it up for QA and demo, and I can demo some of the functionality you guys have questions about. So in our release from last Thursday, we fixed a few things that are very specific to eForm trading partners and just some general fixes for the system. So there were some instances where there was case sensitivity throughout campus filtering. So that has been resolved. We did see some sequencing issues with some eForms. So I know some of you are having some trouble with filing. I can't think of the specific files, but I know O2s, there were some issues. So we've reviewed and fixed some of those eForm sequencing issues. And another one that you all were getting, quite a few of you were getting this parent and parent body part error on Shroy eForms. That should not be occurring anymore. If you do see that, just let us know and we can certainly take a look. With that, I'm just going to jump into these FAQs. So I wanted to start with this one. In what order do I need to submit my transactions? This is a question that we've been getting pretty frequently from various eForm users. So the answer to that is it kind of depends. I wanted to run through just a few of the common scenarios that you all are going to see, or kind of the order that you may be filing in, depending on your claim. So right now you should be able to see this form to MTC crosswalk. I'm going to actually make this a little bit bigger. It's very little right now. So this is a really good guide just to kind of walk through what you need to submit. Now, most of the time, if it is a brand new injury that you've never reported to the state, you're going to start with this first report of injury, the 00. So same as what you did in the past, will be your first report. Now, what comes next after your first report is going to depend on a few things. If it's a situation where you're fully denying the liability, you're going to want to do your 04, your full denial. If it's a situation where you're going to accept it and you want to start paying benefits, and you are paying the benefits as an insurance company, or paying them on behalf of an insurance company as a TPA, you would want to file your IP. That's your initial payment transaction. So with your IP transaction, something that I've seen that people have commonly missed is the benefit and payment segments. So when you are submitting your IP, you're going to need to have at least one benefit segment. So your benefit segment is going to be what you're showing us as far as indemnity benefits that you're paying. So your TTD, your TPD, maybe PPD in some instances, or PTD in very few instances, but it's going to be those indemnity benefits are what you're going to be showing on the IP. Now, something that is really unique to the IP is that you also need that payment segment. So I'll demonstrate that in just a minute here. your payment segment is going to be very similar to your benefit segment. It's just a little bit more scaled back. So really with that payment segment, what we want is we want to know the date that you paid. We want to know the from and through dates. We want to know who you paid and the benefit type. If it is a situation where you are working with a client who has opted to continue salary for the employee, you would actually file this EP, this employer paid. This is taking the place of that little checkbox on the NOPLD that says wage continuation or full wage continuation by the employer. Now, in this instance, this one is a little bit more tricky than the IP. You would not need to submit a payment segment since you're not making a payment, but you would want to submit a benefit segment indicating that you are paying temporary total disability benefits by the employer. So I believe it's, I'll look at the exact terminology, but it's a 250 is the number that's associated with that. In this one, you don't have to submit your benefit payment issue date because you're not paying those benefits, someone else is paying them. Finally, if it's a situation where you're waiting for wages for TPD, or maybe there was no last time beyond the waiting period and you reported the Freud error, you can submit this partial denial transaction. Now, the partial denial transaction is very similar to the denial. What we're going to be looking for in these is just a narrative explaining why you're filing it. So something that is something that would be a good example would be no lost time beyond the waiting period. So if you filed that FROI and then there was no lost time beyond the waiting period, you'd want to file this and type in the narrative, no lost time beyond the waiting period, no indemnity owed. I'm going to take a pause here because I see a few questions in the chat. All right. So CBs are generating discontinuance forms every time, even if TPD is ending and going back to TTD on the second time with no gaps. Yes, that is something that we are aware of. It does generate every time. That is something that we're looking into, hopefully being able to stop it from filing or from firing when it's the TPD going to TTD, because obviously that's not suspension, not a reason for the 239 conferences to be involved. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hop into my system and go into a claim to show you all some examples of the benefit and payment segments. So in this instance, I'm going to select Submit to Existing Claim because obviously I've already filed my FROI on this one. And I will go ahead and submit on Mary Jo. Now, all this information should pre-populate just based on what I submitted on my FROI. And in this instance, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to jump straight down to the benefit and payment segment and show you all exactly how those should be completed. All right. So if I scroll down, you can see here that I don't have anything listed right now for these. It's showing as just blank space. If I wanted to add a benefit, I would just press this button. And now I'm going to get this little benefit modal that pops up. Benefit type. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and say that it's temp total. My gross weekly amount. This is going to be my compensation rate. Let's see what we've got for comp rate for her. And so the average wage is 1037 or 3971. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to go ahead and choose a comp rate of 750. My gross weekly amount effective date, that's going to be my date of injury. So look here, my date of injury is 3/31. Most of the time, this is going to be your date of injury. The only time that it may be different is if you're taking some sort of credit or adjustment. So my net weekly would also be the same because I'm not taking any credits or adjustments on this one. Now, this is going to be the first time that I paid this benefit. So I'm going to put that date as my start. And let's say that I'm paid 2 weeks. I'll go ahead and put 2 in my weeks, 0 in my days, and put my total amount. So 1,500 and my issue dates, 4/14/2020. So that's my benefit segment. I'm all good to go on that one. Now for this, since it's IP, I'm going to have to do my payment segment. So I'm going to enter most of the same information, just not quite as much. Enter my payee, my amount, my from and through dates, and finally my issue date. So this is how we would complete the benefit and payment segments for an initial payment, for an example. Now, if I was doing an employer payment, in that instance, I wouldn't have this. My payment would be blank. I wouldn't have a payment. It would be almost exactly the same. The only difference is that I would be adding temporary total employer paid to the benefit type code. And then I wouldn't need my payment issue date. So that's the only difference between the EP and the IP. No payment segment, and I would need to indicate that it was employer paid, and no benefit payment issue date. I see here that I have a question in the chat. How do we show attorney fees that are being withheld when filing a PY or a suspension? Then how do we show that we paid the withheld attorney's fees? It's a really good one. So what you would do if you are withholding attorney's fees on a regular basis, you would go ahead and report this all as you normally would. The difference is in your benefit type amount paid, you would indicate the amount that had been paid minus the attorney fees. So let's say for this one, I'm really only paying $1,200 because we have withheld attorney's fees. What you would want to do in that instance, I'm going to go ahead and just save this as a draft. So we're going to want to put that $1,200 in there because that's actually what's been paid. Typically what's going to happen in that instance is that it is going to kind of prompt compliance to take a look at it. But if you want to make sure that we know that it's withheld attorney's fees, you can also just add a narrative transaction. And Chris, I see your message about that must be whole number error. So for some reason, there is an error text that is displaying. However, it's not preventing it from being filed. So you can disregard that for now. We do have that marked down as something to look at. So in this instance, I'm in my narrative transaction. All I would have to do here is just type in withholding attorney fees at 20%. And now if I submit this, this is going to come through on the DLI side and we'll be able to tell that you are withholding those attorney fees. Now for paying attorney fees, it's a little bit different. I'm going to go back into Mary Jo's claim. If you're paying those attorney fees to the employee or the attorney, you could show that on a PY transaction. And Chris, that's a good question. It doesn't generate on the form specifically. What you may want to do is just make an addendum to your PY, just indicating that you're withholding those attorney's fees. And Sarah, that's a really good point. So when you report on your PYs, you report the entirety on the benefit level and then split it into payment segments showing each check and payee there. That's exactly what you would want to do. So in this one, let's say that we are paying a lump sum settlement. So I'm going to add a benefit here of lump sum settlement. Now for this one, I don't have to put in as much information because it's a lump sum. Benefit type amount paid, let's say I'm going to pay $5,000. And I want to do my issue date. And down in this payment segment, this is one of those that you're going to want to always do on your PYs. I'll go ahead and do specified lump sum settlement. I'll do 4,000. And my payment issue date. And then I'm going to add another one. Do this one to the attorney. And so now we've got the benefits that have been paid. If this was a situation where you were just paying back the withheld attorney's fees, you would just make sure that this was the proper amount and then just specify down in the payment segment who you are paying those to. All right. I'm going to go back into my form to MTC Cross to continue kind of talking through this. So we've covered all of our first actions. So our IP, our EP, our PD, and our O4. So our denials and our payments. For your denials, I didn't demonstrate those. Those are pretty straightforward. Really, all you would need to do is make sure that you have your denial narrative and your denial reason code and your denial effective date. So those are a little bit more straightforward because those fields are already going to display for you right on the front end. No need to click a plus button or anything like that, like you would with the benefits and the payments. So let's say that I accepted this file and now I need to suspend the benefits or I need to change the benefits. So if I'm changing the benefits without any sort of gap, let's say today it's TTD and tomorrow I know it's going to be PPD, I would submit a change in benefit type transaction. So what this is going to do is it's just going to tell us that you're going from TTD to TPD with no breaks. This is going to generate a discontinuance form, which you can serve on the employee. It'll look similar to the previous NOID 2 transaction. Now, let's say you were going to completely suspend your benefits. If you are totally suspending the benefits, so let's say in this instance it was TTD and they're just going straight back to work, you would file your full suspension transaction. This is going to be exactly like the NOID number 1. So it's going to have a return to work date. You would want to put S1 for your suspension reason code that they're returning to work. Now, if you are suspending benefits for any reason other than return to work, you're still going to want to do this full suspension, but we'll take a look at the reason codes because you would want to indicate in your something a little bit different. So going back into this claim, I'm going to go ahead and open a suspension transaction and show you all an example of what you would do if it was return to work, and what you would do if it wasn't a return to work, if you were discontinuing for another reason. Going back into Mary Jo's claim, I'm going to go ahead and select suspension, full suspension for this one. Now keep in mind that since I didn't submit my SHROI on this one, there won't be an existing benefit segment. The benefit segment will be there for you all when you go to file this because you will have already filed your IP. Since I'm just showing you guys an example of it, my benefit segment won't be populated. So I'm going to go ahead and just populate it really quickly here. What I would want to make sure that I was doing is I would want to make sure that the benefits are up to date when I file the suspension. So last time I had in here 2 weeks of TTD.
Angie, we're still seeing your NPC crosswalk, not your.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thanks, Cheryl. I had my screen on pause while I was navigating from page to page. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to finish typing my benefits here. So previously I had 413. I'm going to go ahead and make this 420. And we'll do 3 weeks instead this time. So I think that's 2250. Don't have my calculator with me, so I apologize if my math is a little off. So what I would mainly be focused on for this suspension transaction is I would be looking for the benefit period through date, the weeks, days, total to all be updated to reflect the total that I paid for that benefit. Now, what I'm also going to want to do is enter my suspension details. So if I was just suspending for a return to work, I would go ahead and just put 420 because that's my last benefit date. I would want to put my suspension reason code as return to work or medically determined qualified return to work. And then I would want to add return to work in my suspension narrative. So another thing that's very important, if the employee is returning to work, you are going to want to put a return to work date, type, and whether or not there were restrictions and if the return was with the same employer. This is very, very important if you're using this medically determined return to work transaction. Now, obviously, there are going to be some times when the employee was released to return to work, but they didn't actually return. In that instance, you would still fill this out. You would put released as the return to work type. Now, if you're using that released return to work type or any of these other suspensions, any of these other types, you're obviously going to want to update your narrative. So I'll just put released to return to work, declined light duty offer. Now we'd want to file this. I'm going to save this one as a draft. In this instance, since the employee was medically cleared to return to work, but they declined the light duty, or if there were any other reason other than return to work, what you're also going to want to do is your discontinuance web form. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom here, oh, I apologize, I am on the wrong modal. Let me get into Mary Jo's claim really quickly. I can get into retest. Once I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click the Submit eForm web form. And then at the very bottom here, we've got this discontinuance web form. Now this is going to be very scaled back compared to that suspension transaction we were just looking at. So this is essentially the equivalent of the NOID 3. I would highly recommend if you are still kind of waiting on all the details to get your suspension information submitted, you can always do this transaction first. So in this one, I'll do that my temp total is being discontinued. I don't need to do the MMI service date because we're not an MMI, but I do need to indicate when it was served on the employee. I'm going to say today as that date. If the employee has an attorney, I would need to indicate that I served it on the attorney. And then the date that the payment would be made through. I'm also going to want to put why my benefits are being discontinued. So employee is released. Now, for this one, you can always attach a narrative as well if for some reason your narrative doesn't fit in this little box. I believe this is a 500 character limit. If that is what you are going to do, just go ahead and put, please see attached narrative. You can also upload any supporting documents. So let's say in this instance, it was because the employee declined my light duty job offer. I would maybe want to put my letter, giving them the option of light duty work, maybe the return to work information from the doctor's office, as well as my narrative transaction. Now, after I've uploaded any supporting documents, I can go ahead and actually serve this right now. So I've got a ton of service process designees for my attorney, which is another attorney. If you check that attorney's checkbox right next to their name, it's going to automatically select their service of process designees. I'm also going to serve the employee in this instance. The employee we see doesn't have a campus account. This is going to be sent via the US mail. I think that's everyone that I need to serve. Actually, you know what? I'm going to serve the employer as well. Same with the employer. That would be sent via US mail. I'm going to do my declaration. Sign this. Now, if you're an admin staff and you're completing this on behalf of an adjuster, you would still sign your own name. The adjuster's name will actually get pulled into the form. I'm going to click submit here. And what's going to happen is it's automatically going to serve my service of process designees for the law firm because they have campus accounts. I will need to print it off, so I can click this document ID. Take me right to the document. I will need to download it and print it off for my employee and employer. So in this one, you can see there's a few things. We have an unknown for claim representative name. That's because I didn't populate that when I did my first report, and I haven't completed a subsequent report on this one. Any attachments are going to be at the bottom. So if you upload that narrative, it'll also be available here. And then the system will also generate address labels for anybody who needs to be served offline. So you can see here, it went ahead and it printed an address label for the employee since the employee does not have a campus account. So that is what we would need to do if it was a NOID 3 situation. Going back to my handy dandy list, bear with me just a second. I'm going to pause my screen while I get there. Let's say after we've done that, we need to reinstate the benefits. That's when we would do our reinstatement of benefits. So this one is pretty self-explanatory. You would just go ahead and update your benefits or add a new benefit type and submit that. That'll let us know that it's been reinstated. Let's say the next thing that you have to do is a settlement. You would do a PY transaction in that instance. That would look a lot like what we previously did for the attorney's fees. You just want to make sure that you have your benefit types fully indicated, and then you'd want to make sure that you have the accurate payments. So your accurate payments in that instance would likely be to the employee, but also could be to the attorney You could show any other payments as well. Let's say there was a child support lien or something like that and you're paying somebody else. You could just add a payment segment and indicate that. Another one that I wanted to highlight is the sub-annual. So a lot of you would probably know this as your interim status report. This is what you're going to file when you've got ongoing indemnity benefits. So let's say we hadn't suspended Mary Jo's benefits and now we're at the 6-month or the year mark and we need to report that those benefits are ongoing. We would file our sub-annual. All we would need to do is update the benefits that are being paid. So we would go back into our benefits segment. I'm going to get back into one of those claims. Do an essay on this one. This one won't require a payment segment, but what I'm going to want to do is just go ahead and update my benefits. We scroll down here, see if we have any existing benefits on this one. These are always going to carry over your existing benefits. So you can see here, I have some existing benefits on this one. Since I'm just doing this essay, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to update this information. So I will put, let's do 12, 16. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm going to put 20 weeks on there and 3 days. I'll update my benefit amount that I've paid. So I'll put 4,000. And I can update my benefit payment issue date with this one. I'm going to leave it the same for this one since it's just an SA. Now that I've got my benefits all up to date, I can submit this one and my SA would be filed with the department. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on is the UR transactions. There's been a lot of questions about URs and what should be filed or what would require a UR. So for that, I'm going to go into my FAQs. This can be found on our EDI eForm page. So I look at my frequently asked questions. The very best place to go to kind of review our guidelines for these is number 7. So if you take a look here, it's going to tell you exactly what would need to be filed for the URs. So you can see here what we are wanting is for URs on previously submitted claims that have ongoing indemnity litigation or vocational rehabilitation, previously submitted claims for which a first action needs to be filed, all claims submitted to DLI within the past 30 days, so that 30-day window would have been prior to November 2nd, and then we would also just request these upon request of DLI. So all of these criteria on here are for claims that were previously reported to the department before go live, so November 2nd. Also, so on SHROI URs, you'd want to file a note that you need a FROI UR first. You'd want to file these on all claims with ongoing indemnity litigation or voc rehab for which a first action has already been submitted. So those were those maintenance type codes that we previously went through, the PD, the O4, the EP, and the IP. So if you essentially did your NOPLD before November 2nd, you would want to do a SHROI UR if you're still paying benefits or if there's litigation or voc rehab. We also may request these. And then just a nice little reminder that any claims filed with DLI before November 2nd would require a UR transaction before other EDI or eForm transactions can be submitted. So with that, I'm going to go back into my slides and run through the rest of our questions. So I think that we hit on this one. I think we hit on this one as well. The next one is a question that we've been getting a lot. When you click submit, you usually will get a little modal that says it was submitted, your transaction. You do not need to wait for us to approve anything before completing the next transaction. The big benefit of being an eForm trading partner is that you are able to just go right into the next one because your validation actually happens on the front end. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit these next questions. And if you all have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. Go ahead and hit on the next two transactions. I'm going to save this one as a draft as well. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on retest. Get into this claim. Now, if you need to see what you've already filed, you're just not sure, you can click into the claim and go to your reporting history tab. So you can see on this one, we only have filed our first report of injury, meaning that we still need to do our first action. So that O4, that PD, EP, or IP, depending on what we're trying to report. And then if I wanted to pull my documents, there's a few different ways that I can do that. I can either click on this little hyperlink, and you're not going to have a hyperlink for every maintenance type code that you submit, but if it does generate a form, there will be a hyperlink for you. You can also click on the Documents tab. So you can see here we've got a few documents here. You can click on our first report of injury or the discontinuance and download those documents. And I see there's a question, has the UR sequencing error rejections been resolved? So I may need a little bit more context. It was my understanding that there were some Troy UR errors, but that should be resolved. I believe that should be resolved for both eForm users and EDI users. If you're still seeing those, though, Sarah, please send them my way and we can take a look. All right, let me get back into my slides here. And this is the end of the questions that I have kind of as my FAQs. But please feel free to send any of your questions in the chat. One other resource that I wanted to make you all aware of is our, oh, and Sarah, I apologize. Are you an EDI submitter? If so, send those over. This is specifically for our eForm users right now. So I know the EDI team is probably working on your 4URs. Rochelle, has the error regarding no previous 4UR on file been corrected? This is the error I've been receiving when filing my latest shore URs. Rochelle, if you can send that over to me to take a look, I can dig into that one a little bit. And one thing that I wanted to talk through, oh, and I do see another question, so I'll answer that. Susan, you're receiving the error about the transaction party load. Is that specifically on your 4URs that you're receiving that? Typically, that is just an instance where we need the employer address. It may or may not be populating for you. So if you populate the employer, I believe it's the employer mailing address, that should resolve that transaction party load issue. All right, so one thing that I did want to run through is our EDI guide. So a lot of you have questions. When you get the errors, you're wondering exactly where to look for them. A lot of the time you're going to get a DN, which is just a data element number, And the best place to look is in our implementation guide. So usually what I would do if I received an error, let's say I got an error on DN52, I usually just do a Control F and then type in 52, and it will take me right to this data element. So you can see here, employee date of birth is what is causing the problem. So it has to be a valid date, and it has to be later than the date of injury. That's just as an example. So this table is really helpful. One thing to call out with this table, you'll see these little, in the requirements tab, you'll see the MC, the AR, all of those little codes. If you're not sure what they mean, you can take a look. It's on page 14 of the document, and it'll tell you exactly what it means. If it's mandatory, it means you have to have it. If it's fatal, it means you have to have it. Mandatory conditional, it may be required in some instances. Applicable, available, you should send it if it is available to you, or if you want to, you don't have to. AR is similar. The only difference between the two is that if you provide it and it's not in the correct format, or if it's invalid data, it will reject. These two don't really apply to eForm users, but it's good to have the entire list. So just kind of a good resource for people to use. I'll go ahead and put this in the chat. If you're just not really sure what data element is being referenced. And I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat right now. Does anybody have anything that they would like me to review or any other questions? We've got about 18 minutes left. If we don't have any questions or anything that you all want to review, we can absolutely give you a little bit of time back. So just, we're kind of in the process of scheduling additional answer hours. So the next couple weeks, we won't be scheduling these just because we know a lot of you will be out due to holidays. We're planning on resuming our answer hours the first week in January. So I just wanted to check in with this group. Is this something that you all find beneficial that you'd like us to continue, or do you feel that we could maybe discontinue these answer hours for eForm users? And just feel free to put any feedback in the chat, and we will take that. Okay. So I'm seeing that we want to continue with these, so I will go ahead and make sure that we continue to put these on the schedule. So if there are no other questions, I will go ahead and end a little early today. Thank you all so much for attending. If you have any further questions or if you're running into issues, please just send them our way, and we can absolutely help with those. Other than that, have a great day, everybody.